Therefore, nothing in this entire universe can match our King, can match his priceless kingdom in the hearts of his people. And so Jesus tells his listeners in Matthew 13, and again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. You see this word merchant here? It's of a word emporos in the original languages. It speaks of an individual who would sell out to the seas as a dealer or entrepreneur to sell goods. You see, in the ancient world, it was common for a merchant to travel from country to country. He would gather supplies and goods, and then he would sell them to a vendor who then would sell them for a profit. Now, ironically, merchants in Jesus' day didn't always have the best reputation. You want to know why? Because they often sold single-item goods like oils and vegetables and fruits, often of questionable quality. What's Jesus' point? You see, interestingly, wealth in Jesus' day consisted primarily of three things: clothing, food, and money. And many people in Jesus' day who desired to diversify their investments would not invest in oil or vegetables or fruits, but rather pearls, which were equivalent to diamonds today. You see, pearls were highly valued. Some biblical commentators think they're the most desired item on earth at the time of Jesus' teaching in the ancient world. More so than even gold. Have you ever thought about the incredible wonder that the Lord works to make a pearl? You see, a speck of sand or a parasite invades an oyster. And an oyster, in order to combat this intruder, secretes naturally, given by God, a substance called nacre that immobilizes this speck of sand or this parasite. That begins to, as it surrounds it completely, crystallize over and over and over again. And before you know it, something that was awful, something that was undesirable, miserable, can now be beautiful. Remember this point when we study verse 46. Can you see now why pearls had such value? You see, divers who were to seek these pearls would often risk their life. They would, as they traveled to the Red Sea or the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean to find these pearls, would tie rocks around their legs, would either jump or be pushed off cliffs, and would have what? 3 to 4 minutes to go to the bottom and to secure these pearls back and forth and back and forth. Many of these divers would lose their lives. No wonder the Jewish Talmud cites the pearl as priceless, beyond anything else in life. The Egyptians historically worshipped pearls. In fact, Cleopatra dissolved the pearl at a party one time, estimated at $10 million. And in front of her entire audience, she put this now dissolved pearl into a cup and drank it before her audience, displaying the opulence and power of the Egyptian empire. The Greeks simply believed that pearls were formed by the dew of the gods. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant who, in search of fine pearls, gave up all he had to receive this pearl. You see, pearls were invaluable in antiquity, and apparently even in eternity. In fact, did you realize, according to Revelation chapter 21, verse 21, that God will spare no expense in his construction of the new heaven, and that every gate, 12 in totality, will be made of a pearl. Jesus here uses an imagery of an earthly treasure to transition to his point about a heavenly treasure. And he says in verse 46, who, on finding one pearl of great value, went and sold all that he had and bought it. Now you notice the proactiveness and intentionality of this merchant? This man would do whatever it took to secure the pearl. This merchant was not like the mundane servant in verse 44. He had a shrewd eye as an entrepreneur. He knew the intrinsic value and worth of this pearl, and he acted accordingly. This merchant's livelihood, his family's vitality depended upon his assessment of the profitability of this pearl. Consequently, this man gave it all to secure it. You want to know why? Because we measure the value of something by what we gladly sacrifice or give up to keep or to obtain it. This man willingly impoverished his family. He willingly bankrupted himself, gave up everything for this one pearl. You see, he did not need anything else. He said, well, wait a minute, isn't it just one pearl? It's just one. I mean, how much was this pearl? We don't know. What we do know is about 10 years ago, there was a 75-pound pearl in the Philippines that sold for $100 million. Was that this pearl? We don't know. How much was it? We don't know. All we know is that to the merchant, it was priceless. You see, the merchant's focus was not on what he was giving up, but are you ready for this? By what he gained. You see, in giving all that he had, he gained all that he needed. Do we have this same view of Christ? As we are living for Christ, do we focus on what we are giving up, or we focus on what we've gained? You see, the Bible represents the word treasure as something of extreme value that is pursued or protected or preserved at all cost. To treasure Christ, like this merchant did with this pearl, it means that we must commit totally to Jesus Christ with all of our being as the greatest priority in all our lives. Jesus wants all of us. And following him is a priceless, grace-filled privilege that is to have the highest priority in our lives. Now think about that for a minute. As you look through your week, as you go over your calendar, who or what has had the highest priority in your life? What would your calendar and your Excel sheets, your bank accounts, what you give your eyes to and your heart to, how you spend your free time, what would it display? Did you realize, according to an article in the Wall Street Journal, that people spend over 50% of their day thinking about how to potentially seek or keep money or possessions? Do you see how free, how intentional this merchant lived once he knew the value of the pearl?